And I don't want to harp on the fact that you're 25, but I got to harp on the fact that you're 25. And yet you're telling me about your investor, your experience as being an actual investor. When you made the decision to, I guess, not to take advantage of this opportunity, if you don't mind me asking, what exactly were you giving up in terms of, say, salary?
I mean, so, my very first job, like with JP Morgan, I think they offered me right out of the gate before bonus, $95,000.
And your mom and dad were looking at you like, are you crazy? Is that?
Exactly. When I left my job working at General Atlantic as an investor to go and do my own thing, in the moment I was just like, I've got to believe in myself. But like, it was crazy because that year, first year out of college, no work experience, nothing except for the college experience that I had and being on the job. That year they paid me.
Hey folks, welcome to another edition of the Kenn Rashad Show. As I told you guys in the last episode, we weren't going to focus as much on my story as much as we're going forward, focus on the stories of others. And my next guest, without question, in this first edition or the second edition or the iteration of the Entrepreneurial Spotlight, I think you will find to be an absolute treat. My guest today is Lucius McDaniel IV. He is the founder and CEO of BiteSight. It's a video-first food delivery app changing how Gen Z discovers what to eat. And you're going to learn the story of how in just a few weeks, his content pulled over like 100 million views, and it pushed BiteSight into the Apple App Store's top ranking in this particular category. And I'm talking about ahead of brands like Uber Eats and Starbucks. And if I understand correctly, he did it without absolutely spending a dime in ads. So without further ado, let's welcome my special guest, Lucius McDaniel IV. Brother, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me, and really appreciate the great introduction.
I mean, look, man, it's well earned, well deserved. Full disclosure, I've known Lucius for a little bit, primarily because his father just happens to be my line brother, my frat brother of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. But still, that doesn't mean that he's here simply because of that. I guarantee you, he's got receipts. And so we're going to talk about that. So Lucius, for those who may not necessarily know what BiteSight is, because to be quite honest with you, I've seen the app. I've tried to do as much research as I possibly could. And I wanted to make sure that I didn't go too far or get too in depth about what BiteSight is, because I wanted to give you an opportunity to share it with us. So for those of us who may not be aware, explain what BiteSight is and what it's all about.
Yeah, so with BiteSight, we're reimagining what the food delivery app experience is going to be like for Gen Z. And when we think about that, what we've created with BiteSight today is an experience where it's video-based and it's social. And so when a user opens up BiteSight, they're immediately hit with videos from nearby restaurants, specifically local restaurants. And anything that they see on that feed, kind of like TikTok, they can hit a button, order it, and get it delivered right to their door. From there, we kind of realized, especially living in places like New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco, and all of these places where our team is from, that so much of the kind of good food that you want to eat and try are actually hidden gems. And so what we also do is we help you figure out what are your friends' favorite spots they're ordering for takeout or getting for delivery, and figure out what those are so you can order them too. And so in essence, we've kind of built this like social version of TikTok Shop, but for food. And that's BiteSight.
So let me ask you this, because typically it's been stated, especially as it relates to endeavors or ventures in the entrepreneurial space, one of the things that's always focused or that's always discussed is to find the pain. So what was that? Was there like a particular aha moment that you came across that made you realize that something like BiteSight was actually something that the public could benefit from? What was that moment like? And when did it happen?
Totally. So for me, I started my career actually in finance. I moved to New York City after going to UT Austin, proud UT alum. And I spent almost 2 years as an investor. And one of the perks that I got at my job was that I got to order food delivery, fully covered by the company once, twice a day, every single day. And so it's kind of in that experience where I was like, you know what? I'm really getting tired of eating sweet green and Chipotle every single day. But at the same time, I wanted to try, new spots that were good and that were tasty. But it turned out that whenever I would use Uber Eats and DoorDash, because all of the images were stock images or AI generated, and everything was 4.7 stars, I never knew what was good. And so it was like half the time I'd order food from a new restaurant and it would be a microwave meal that just someone sent me for $30. And when I started kind of realizing that that was not the experience that I expected or even wanted, I started talking to my friends about it. And people were saying the exact same thing. They were like, yeah, I actually never try new places because, I don't know what's good, but I wish I could. And so that's kind of when we set out to say, hey, what would people do if you made it really easy for them to support really great local small businesses? And that was kind of what built BiteSight and the pain that we were solving, is like helping people actually find out what's good to eat for delivery and getting it to them, really quickly.
So when you look at something like what you're doing right now, kind of fill me in. Now, granted, despite the fact that you've been able to kind of like find yourself kind of in the upper echelon of the app store in the categories that you're working with. Correct me if I'm wrong. Now, BiteSight is only available in certain markets, right? Is it only available in New York right now, or is it pretty much anywhere?
Correct. So that's the kind of funny thing about this, is that even though our app only works in New York, we went so viral that we were the number 2 app in the App Store for food and beverage. And I think at one point, number 12 overall across the entire US App Store, even though people could only use the app in BiteSight or only in New York. And so that just kind of goes to show how popular our app was. And I think what's interesting is that what I think I really held on to from that moment is that we had resonance, right? Our product was something where people saw it, but they also felt it. So much so that even though they couldn't use it themselves, they're like, I need to download this because I want to support and I want to try it out and I can't wait till it's in my city. And so now, our team has been working super diligently to get BiteSight from where it is today, which is just in New York, all across the country. And there's some really exciting things that we're working on right now to make that happen, hopefully pretty soon.
Right. So here is one of the things that I'm curious about, and I'm sure you can probably do a pretty good job of explaining this to me. When you come across, and I don't want to say trend or fad, but without question, this has been somewhat of a phenomenon, if you will. And sometimes, is it a challenge to kind of maintain the momentum that you've already been able to kind of to build up to this point? I mean, obviously, I think you've got some investors involved with this, right? But is there a challenge in making sure that you continue to maintain the momentum that you've already built based upon how, you have these viral moments and they kind of come and go? But I guess the question is, what is the key to making sure that you stay in the limelight? Is it really just about making sure you constantly create quality content that kind of makes it possible for people to kind of see you in the limelight, if you will?
That's a really great question. And what I would say is that it's two different games, right? There's the game of top of funnel, right? How do you get people to know about you and give you a shot, right? And that's one whole, hard game that, you could spend years, decades, lifetimes mastering. But then I think there's this other game of retention and building something that's quality that people love. And so, for me as the founder of BiteSight, I'm constantly working with my team and my co-founder and figuring out how do we actually master both of those. And so directly, yes, it's something I think about constantly. How am I going to keep curating content that gets people to try BiteSight? And so we run all kinds of campaigns and promotions with influencers and creators and things like that to get people to know about BiteSight and keep trying it so we can keep that top of funnel, going and spinning really quickly. But then I also spend a lot of time talking to users and figuring out, what is it about our product that you love? What is it about our product that we can improve upon so that you use it even more? What is it about this kind of idea or concept that we could evolve or change over time that would make you share it with your friends, right? And that to us is actually one of the largest unlocks that we've been focusing on recently, which is how do you create an experience that is so great and that is so valuable that someone says, I love BiteSight so much that my friend needs to know about it too. And when you get people doing the selling for you and getting people sharing your product organically, that's actually, I think, how you build these huge, massive generational companies. And you've seen it time and time again. Facebook, Snapchat, MySpace, all of these different social media apps. The reason they got big is because, yes, they had their own kind of viral moments, but really what it was at the end of the day is they had their users who loved it so much that they would share it with their friends. And so we're building that exact same experience into BiteSight today.
You've said often, and I've heard you say this in a lot of the interviews that you've done previously. You say that this app is TikTok meets DoorDash. How did you come to that? How did you come to that? I mean, explain that, because it makes sense to me, but kind of put that in perspective to those who still may not necessarily be aware with what this app is about.
Mm-hmm. So the way that we actually came to that saying was actually not anything that, I could take credit for. Like, I think we were literally trying to explain this vision that we had for what we wanted this app to be. And eventually, a customer of ours was like, oh, it's almost like TikTok meets DoorDash. And, at the time, we would say all kinds of things like, yeah, watch videos just like you do on TikTok. And you scroll through your feed like you would on these apps. And then you hit the order button and your food shows up just like DoorDash. Mm-hmm. And in explaining that, someone's just like, okay, take out all the extra words and just say it's TikTok meets DoorDash. And that's it. And so once we kind of heard that for the first time, we're like, you know what? You've got a point. And we just kind of ran with it and it really stuck.
Hey folks, Kenn Rashad. We'll get back to the show in just a second, but I've got to take a quick pause just to put something on your radar. My business coach, Dr. Myron Golden, is hosting his next Make More Offers Challenge. And if you're serious about growing your business, scaling your income, and creating lasting impact, this is the place to be. It's 5 days of high-level teachings that'll show you how to structure, price, and position offers that don't just sell, but they help your business grow with purpose. I've been through this challenge myself, and it completely shifted the way I think about business, from how I build to how I serve. So do yourself a favor, go to offers.kennrashad.com and secure your spot for the next Make More Offers Challenge. Now let's get back to the show. So let's kind of backtrack a little bit, because I think for those who may not necessarily be familiar with who you are, I think it's important to kind of put some things in proper perspective and make sure we put things in proper context, because at the ripe age, I think you told me you're 25, right?
Correct. 25 as of a few weeks ago.
25 years old. This is not your first endeavor. I mean, you are an entrepreneur. You are true to it. So take us back a little bit. You talk about your entrepreneurial journey and how it actually started.
Of course. So I've always had, I think, this like knack for starting things. I've always wanted to be a problem solver. And I think when I realized that I could combine this like love of identifying problems and then solving them with turning that into a career, that career being entrepreneurship, I kind of knew this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And so, my very first, I think, real swing at entrepreneurship was in college when me and a few of my friends started working on this company that would basically help really small nonprofits manage their finances and like raise money. And, at the time, you kind of had two different solutions that existed, right? You had GoFundMe, which was like really, really good for one-off campaigns, right? You're an organization doing a fundraiser and you're doing this one-off campaign. So you've got GoFundMe. On the flip side, let's say you're a larger nonprofit, you're really established, you've got, organizational documents and a CEO, whatever, you can then go get a bank account. But then there was kind of this like middle section of people who are running these like student organizations, for example, who are not quite nonprofits, but also need to be able to, manage their finances and raise money more so than like one-off GoFundMe campaigns. And so after being involved in so many of these organizations in college, I was like, let's build something that kind of sits in the middle here. And that was really my first foray into like actual entrepreneurship, and making money was something that I built with some friends.
What was the
And
name of that
so
project?
that was the name. The company was called Fly,
Fly. Okay.
PHLY, and it was short for philanthropy on the fly. And
Wow.
so that was kind of the idea, is that we were just like, look, we've got all these organizations that we're a part of that, are raising money in Venmo. And it's like one person's mom's Venmo account that everyone's sending thousands of dollars to. And like, that's just not going to fly because so many crazy things can happen. And so that's when we were like, we got to make something that's here and legit, but not nearly as cumbersome as setting up a bank account, but also, more permanent than individual GoFundMe campaigns for every single event. And so that was my first go at it, and loved the experience. I mean, really understood what it was like to raise money, because we raised a little bit of money from some investors in Austin when I was in college. I learned what it was like to work with a team and like actually ship things. And then I think finally I kind of learned what it's like to sell and get our product into people's hands and make real money. And so I think that was the thing that really hooked me, early on, and was a pretty formative experience that ultimately led to me doing BiteSight, many years later.
If you don't mind me asking, and if you don't want to answer this question, you don't have to, but what you said it taught you how to sell
Mm-hmm.
with that first venture, what were your sales like?
Oh man, I mean, at that time, we were doing sales where it was like any organization we could find, we wanted them to try out BiteSight. And so what's crazy is that we originally started trying to serve like fraternities and sororities, right? And so what sales looked like then
You wanted to try
was going
BiteSight or you wanted to try Fly?
fly,
Okay,
right?
yeah, you said BiteSight. Okay, good. We
Oh,
just
sorry.
wanted to Fly. Yeah, go ahead.
Founder brain.
Right.
But anyways, we wanted all these people to try Fly back in the day, and so we just go to their org meetings and show up and things like that. And so that's kind of what the sales process was like. But what was awesome is that we then started doing campaigns with all types of nonprofits who would basically say, "Hey, we like what you guys are doing. We're not fraternities or sororities or student orgs, but
Mm.
we." And so what was awesome is that, by the time that we were kind of at our pinnacle, we had multiple, nonprofits and fundraisers raising, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars on BiteSight. And that was all like revenue generating for us. And so that was a really, really cool experience.
Okay. Okay. You talk about how you are proud UT grad. Um, Talk about that experience and talk about how uh, your time at UT helped kind of prepare you for where you are right now. Talk about that if you don't mind.
Mm. So one, I think that what I loved about UT as an experience and as a place, compared to I think some of the things I've learned from people who went to some other schools, which all great schools. But
Hmm.
when I ended up getting a job in finance, it was kind of interesting because I looked around the table and no one looked like me for a number of
Right.
reasons.
Right. Yeah.
But if we were looking at it from the lens of like schools and educational background, I looked at like my peer set, and every single person, I think without fail, went to an Ivy League, right?
Mm.
Everyone went to Harvard. Everyone went to UPenn. Everyone went to Cornell. Everyone went to, Stanford, right? All of these different places. And then you've got me, the lone wolf out there who went to, this big, Big 12 at the time, now SEC state school. And I think what I loved about, that is that I really got to focus on being a fun person to work with, and not to necessarily say a personality hire because I definitely went in there and had my chops and did the things I needed, but I think I brought a level of personality and charisma that I only picked up from growing up in the South and going to this kind of state school where so many other people approached everything I think from this like very academic lens. I was able to approach things from like a people first lens. And
Hmm.
I think I got a lot of that from being at these like at this big school UT that wasn't pretentious in a way that I think some different schools get that a bias. And so that was I think a big part of it. Is like growing up in Texas and going to Texas really just made me feel as if I was a really well-rounded person and could meet anyone at any level, which I think was awesome.
Right.
But then also, just great education.
Hmm.
Like, I feel like I came out of school so well prepared for what I wanted and needed to do. The entrepreneurial programs at UT and organizations that I was a part of were great. The business classes that I took, fantastic. I mean, I feel like I came out with great fundamentals, especially compared to people who went to Ivy Leagues but didn't have
Right.
business programs and were only studying liberal arts. And so I really felt like I had a great grasp of like business, and that not only prepared me for being an investor, like I did when I was working in finance, but it also prepared me for a lot of the challenges that we've faced at BiteSight.
So see, you're leading me into my next question because, and I don't want to harp on the fact that you're 25, but I got to harp on the fact that you're 25,
Fair
and
enough.
yet you're telling me about your investor, your experience as being an actual investor. So talk about that. I mean, and this is before BiteSight, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Correct. This was
So
my first job out of college.
you were an investor before BiteSight. Talk about your experience as an investor. How do you get into that space, and talk about that for a moment?
Of course. So, I worked at a fund called General Atlantic, which fantastic
Hmm.
fund.
Hmm.
Absolutely loved my time there. Loved the people that I worked with. And it was about 100 billion AUM, assets under management fund, primarily focused on, at least my group, focused on technology investing. And so we've invested, in all types of companies that you've heard about, Facebook, Uber, Airbnb, a lot of the large tech names. We led their growth rounds, and so basically these were the investment rounds they raised right before they went public. And so what's awesome about General Atlantic is that the fund kind of came in and pioneered, this world of growth investing. And what that means is that when you're early stage company, in the early days, maybe you have a few people, maybe you've got 100 employees, whatever. You can go to venture capitalists and they can write you a $10 million check pretty easily. But all of a sudden, let's say you're a company that has 1,000 employees and you're not quite ready to IPO and raise from public markets, but maybe you still need to raise another 100 or 200 or $300 million in equity, right? Not debt because you're a high growth company, maybe not profitable, but equity. That's where General Atlantic came in. And so I think what was awesome for me is that not only did I get to really see businesses that were massively successful, right? Because at this point in time, you're not necessarily looking at companies that are still these potential moonshots, flip a coin, they work, they don't. Like
Right.
these were real businesses that were generating, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue and were growing really quickly. And so I think seeing that up close and meeting the CEOs and the founders of those companies and seeing the strategic decisions they were making and how they thought about raising more money or growing a business that was already really large and taking it to that next level so it could IPO was incredibly formative to how I thought about approaching things with BiteSight. At the same time, I was also really fortunate that one of my main coverage areas while I was at General Atlantic was restaurant tech investing. And so I
Hmm.
spent, the better half or better part of my 2 years at GA just looking at restaurant software. All the software that was used in restaurants, everything from the point of sale system to the front of house software for like getting reservations, the back of house software for, managing how much inventory you have or who's going to be working in the shift management. I actually got to look at those companies and study what was working and what wasn't. And so for me, having that experience and understanding, where there was opportunity in the restaurant tech space was a big part of what actually enabled me to go and build BiteSight and have confidence that there was an opportunity here.
Now, if I understood correctly, and if I read you, but weren't you with a like Y Combinator at one point?
Yeah, so it's funny. I've actually been really fortunate. I got to go through Y Combinator 2 times, and I got to see it from two different perspectives. And so, basically, my very first real job, I would say, was when I was in college, my very freshman year of college. So I just gotten there. I had done a full year, and I had an opportunity to go intern at J.P. Morgan, the investment bank. And this was crazy because JP Morgan really only accepts like juniors and seniors to go
Yeah.
intern.
Yeah.
And by just sheer force of like networking and talking to the right people and all of these different things, I was fortunate enough to get an opportunity to intern as a freshman at JP Morgan. And it was the greatest opportunity that I could imagine. All my peers were kind of around me like, oh my gosh, like, how did Lucius do this? Like, all of these things. And I remember thinking to myself, like, how did I do this? Like, I really lucked into it. It was definitely one of those, right place, right time type of things. But the kind of funny thing is that at the time, I also kind of had this mentor, who's to this day, one of my best friends and still one of the greatest mentors I've had. And her name was Catherine Allen. And she had just started this company, probably a year prior. And, she had kind of mentored me through my freshman year, because she was now, graduating senior at this point. And, she basically was like, Lucius, I know you've got this opportunity to go work at JP Morgan this summer. And everyone wants to go work at JP Morgan, but like, I think you really like entrepreneurship. And I also knew that like I really liked entrepreneurship. And so, what I ended up doing is I basically said, you know what? Instead of going and spending my summer doing JP Morgan, I'm just going to take a risk and go work at this tiny 2-person startup. And like at the moment, everyone around me was looking at me crazy. I mean, my parents were even looking at me crazy. They're like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? Right. And the kind of funny story here is that I had so much belief and conviction in this person, Catherine, that she was doing something really awesome that I wanted to be a part of, that I turned down this opportunity to work at JP Morgan and do it, and instead was going to stay in Austin. Funnily enough, 3 days into accepting this opportunity and turning down JP Morgan and saying, I'll figure it out later, they get into YC. And so what was supposed to be, just this, really slum it out with no money from investors in Austin, just kind of doing whatever for the summer and figuring out what entrepreneurship was that way, just by pure kind of taking that risk, I joined the startup and we get into YC. And so that summer, instead of staying at JP Morgan, I moved to San Francisco and spend the entire summer interning at this startup. And I get to wear so many hats, everything from operations to sales to product. And that ended up being one of the greatest decisions of, my early career, because not only was I fortunate enough to be able to go and spend a summer at JP Morgan like 2 years later, so still got to get that notch in my belt, but I ended up working at this company Flow for 2.5 years throughout college. And I learned a ton, wore a ton of different hats. And I think that was kind of the real experience that made me say, you know what? This startup stuff is actually what I want to be doing for the rest of my life. And so I am so glad that I got in the habit of taking risk early, because I think there's so many folks out there who never get in the habit of taking risk. And before you know it, so much of your life has gone by and you haven't gotten comfortable with taking that leap. And so you'll never really be in a position to. And so for me, because, I had basically done that once, right? Where I had said, hey, I'm going to try and take a bet on myself or a bet on a startup and, see if things work out and know that I'll be fine if they don't. When it came time for me to take that same leap and leave my really cushy job in finance that, was allowing me to live this super fun bachelor life in New York as a 20-something-year-old, I was mentally prepared because I had done it before. And so, what's great is that I had that experience at Y Combinator while I was in college and working at the startup, learned a ton, realized how valuable of an experience that was. And then I was fortunate enough to, a few years later with my own company and as a founder rather than an intern, do YC then too. And, happy to talk about that experience, but fortunate to have been able to do it twice.
I want to make sure we don't talk over the heads of some who may not be. So I just, for the sake of those who may not be aware, explain briefly what Y Combinator is.
Great point. So Y Combinator is a startup accelerator. And what that means is that they take a handful of companies every single year and they give the companies two things. One, investment. So they say, hey, we're going to give you, a lump sum of money for a portion of your company. And so they invest in your company. And they also give you mentorship. And so not only did I get this investment in my company that, literally allowed me to pay my rent and hire a team of people to work with us and, kind of get this thing off the ground when, before then we were just living on ramen noodles and trying to figure out how we were going to make a single dollar. From there, they also put us in touch with some incredible business people. For example, one of our group partners was a man by the name of Michael Steibel, who founded a company called Twitch,
Mm,
which sold for hundreds of millions of dollars,
right.
uh, which was fantastic. And so having someone like that as a mentor that we got to talk to every single week, multiple times a week, about the things that were going well and the things that were going poorly, was incredibly important to our business. And so I eternally grateful for my time and the folks at YC, because I don't think BiteSight would be
Right.
here as it is today without their early kind of support and championing of
You
us.
you you talk early on. You talked about the opportunity that you had with JP Morgan. Was that an internship or was that an actual opportunity the first time? Or I'm just trying
Yeah,
to
so the first time, yeah, great point, great point. So I got an internship opportunity to go to JP Morgan my freshman year. And so they said, hey, you can go and do banking at JP Morgan. I think it would have been in like the New York office. And then sure enough, soon after, like the next year, COVID hit. And so
Mhm.
everything got canceled. And so I ended up going and doing a JP Morgan internship that was supposed to be in their San Francisco office doing technology investment banking. And I ended up doing the internship, 2 years later, instead of when I originally got it my freshman year, but it was all remote. And so I was basically just in my childhood bedroom, typing away on Excel all day, which, not nearly as fun as I
Right.
think, kind of envision it, but it was still a great learning lesson.
So the reason I'm asking is because obviously an opportunity comes up and you decided not to necessarily take it. And again, I'm only asking this because again, this may hopefully inspirational to someone who actually decides to make the decision to bet on themselves as opposed to kind of going with the flow. When you made the decision to, I guess, not to take advantage of this opportunity, if you don't mind me asking, what exactly were you giving up in terms of, say, salary?
I mean, so, my very first job, like with JP Morgan, I think they offered me right out of the gate before bonus, $95,000. And so
And your
crazy.
mom and dad were looking at you like, are you crazy? Is that
Exactly. And what's insane, I think, beyond that is, and again, this is just crazy, but it puts everything into perspective and how crazy this world is, which I think I didn't really fully appreciate it, when I was in it. But when I left my job working at General Atlantic as an investor to go and do my own thing, you know, in the moment I was just like, I've got to believe in myself. But like, it was crazy because that year, first year out of college, no work experience, nothing except for the college experience that I had and being on the job. That year, they paid me $200,000,
wow?
which is insane.
Yeah,
And so it's like to be able to leave that and go take a bet on yourself, there's insane amount of opportunity cost because it also stacks. You think about what could have been, so on and so forth. And I've got friends who stuck around and say didn't leave and, want to stay on kind of that finance straight path, not really take risk. And like
right,
those same people are now making 400, $500,000 and they're my age. Right. And so sometimes it gets hard when you're like, man, like what could it have been if I stuck around? But I
right.
think that's where building that kind of conviction and belief in yourself that it'll all pay off, I think really helps. But also, I think really being in love with what you're doing
Hmm.
matters so, so much. Because on those days when things are really hard, and you want to fall back to the maybe I shouldn't have done this, maybe this was the wrong decision. Instead, what I think about is the fact that I'm doing the thing that I love with people that I love spending time with. And, I don't think I would trade any amount of money for that because I get to kind of control my own destiny in a way that, I would not have when I was working for someone else.
Okay. So let's fast forward to, I guess, the early days when you decided to move forward with BiteSight. Okay. And I'm guessing this is obviously before the viral moment, but I guess it's safe to say that not that necessarily everything has to be a struggle, but I'm guessing everything wasn't necessarily the way they are right now when you first started out, right? Talk about some of the challenges that you had to face when you decided to move forward or to go all in with BiteSight.
Oh my goodness. It was so hard. I mean, So funnily enough, not many people know this, so this is, you might be one of the first people to put this in a podcast, but what we actually started with BiteSight was not food delivery. The
Mm.
original idea was video-based QR code menus. So, I'm sure almost everyone watching this has seen a QR code menu.
Yeah, right.
Go to the restaurant, you scan the QR code, and in many cases, you get like a PDF. It's just like a little document. You're kind of pinching and zooming to read the text. Not a great experience. And so, what we decided that we were going to do, the first idea was that we're going to do a video based version of this. We knew restaurants were uploading all of these videos of their dishes to Instagram and TikTok. And we were basically going to make it so that whenever you scan the QR code menu, you can see what the dish is and all the dish details and descriptions, but you can also see a video of it. And so, in those days, we were literally going door to door to sell BiteSight to these restaurants. And what's so funny is that it wasn't working. It wasn't working in the sense that, for the first however many dozens, if not hundreds of doors that I knocked on, I got no's. I mean, literally, I cannot tell you how many restaurant owners or people told me some variation of no. It was everything from like, you're the 10th person to try to sell me today, get out. Or someone who was clearly the manager looking me in the eyes and being like, yeah, sorry, manager's not in. All kinds of things. But, we just kept knocking and we kept going door to door to door until one day we got one person to sign up.
Wow.
And then one day after that, we got another person to sign up. And we got another person to sign up. And so before you know it, we had all these people who were signing up for BiteSight and paying for our software and using it in their restaurant. And so it was just truly a testament of like, you really got to get to the 101st store.
Wow.
Because if you give up at the 100th,
right,
that's it.
So let me
that's
no just so let me ask you, from the moment that you decided to go all in, knocking on these doors, what would you estimate from the very first no to the time someone actually says yes? How much time had passed?
Oh man, I would probably say a good month or two before we got our first. Yeah, because it was. Really
did you ever think about giving it up at any point, or were you just like
100%, 110%? Like, it was so funny because, at one point in time, our original idea, like the very first thing that me and my co-founder ever wanted to build together, was this QR code menu idea, and it was going so poorly that at one point we were like, "This isn't going to work. We got to scrap it all together." Right? We literally had to scrap it all together, and so we started just building random things. We were building software for, roofers in Hawaii. Like literally any random combination of words that you could think of, we were trying to see if there was something that we could do there, just because we wanted to figure out who had a problem and we would solve it. Whether or not it would turn into a large business or not, we didn't know. But we knew that if we just started with one problem for one person, we'd eventually start making some progress somewhere. And so, there was a brief moment where, we said, hey, this is done. It's not going to work. And what was funny is that we had basically kind of given up on the idea, started focusing on some other random ideas that we had kind of scribbled out. And one day, my co-founder, Zach, who's not even the salesperson, he's a CTO. And so he spends all this time, writing the code and building the app. He's sitting at the bar of a restaurant in downtown New York. And he's just chatting up, one of the bartenders there about, life and things like that. And he was like, oh, and yeah, by the way, like I actually built this thing for restaurants that whenever people scan a QR code, it shows the video. Well, that bartender also happened to be the general manager of the restaurant.
Wow.
And so without him having any idea, he had sold our very first person to ever use BiteSight. And so literally from that moment on,
the CTO did this. The CTO did this.
The CTO, he's the one who actually made that first sale just by talking about the product randomly when we weren't even working on it. And so that became our very first pilot. It was a place called Takumi Taco in Chelsea Market. And I'll never forget that for the rest of my days. And they were the people who took that very first chance on BiteSight.
Wow. Okay. So you get that first sale. And so at this time, you've already made the decision not to go with the the video QR code, right?
No,
Or
this is when we were doing the video QR codes. And so this was basically him selling the video QR codes.
okay.
And so we get our first, customer, this Takumi taco place. And, they take the bet on us and things start working. And so we get a
Oh,
few
I
more
see.
restaurants
Okay.
to try it. We're in a few places. Things are starting to build momentum. The way that we actually ended up doing QR codes, or the way we ended up doing food delivery
Food videos,
actually
yeah.
happened like 2 months down the line.
Mm.
And so, I can definitely share that story if you want, but
Yeah.
it happened.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And so, okay, yeah, basically the kind of funny story here is that, at this point, we had now both gone full time on BiteSight for QR code menus.
Right.
And we were trying to figure out, okay, obviously we need to scale this thing, we need to sell into more restaurants, but also we need to raise some money because, at this point, Zach doesn't have any money because he had just graduated from grad school. I had a little bit of money, but New York is expensive. And so I
Yeah.
only knew it was only going to last so much longer.
Right.
And also, we wanted to be able to invest and kind of speed things up. And so we were like, we need to raise money. And so what do? We apply to Y Combinator, the accelerator program that we were talking about earlier. And it was in kind of that period when we're applying to YC and we're pitching them, where they're basically like, look, we walked them through this entire pitch where we're like, we're building this QR code menu solution and restaurants are loving it. And they're loving it because when people see videos of that tall margarita and the massive cheesecake and the appetizers, they get all of those things. And so now restaurants are selling more food than they would have before because of the power of video. And so, we're making this entire pitch. We're super excited about it. At this time, Zach and I, my co-founder, are like, this is the greatest idea ever. Like, we're about to be billionaires building this QR code menu software. And we do this pitch, and we basically get a call back later that night. And our partner, I remember this so vividly, was like, I really like, you and Zach. He's talking to us. It's like, I really like the two of you guys. However, I hate this idea. I hate it. And we're deflated. We're defeated.
Right. I was
We're
about to
like,
say,
oh
how
my
did you feel
God.
about that? What?
I mean, you got to remember, like, it was such crazy times. Like, I had quit my job at this point, now 2 or 3 months prior. I had, just my savings, but I just signed this new expensive lease in New York because I hadn't planned to, quit my job when I signed it. And so I'm on the hook for 12 months of rent. I hadn't told my parents I had quit my job yet either because I was like, I got to figure it out a little bit more, before I let them know, that I quit my job and that, whatever. Because, you know how moms are. They're very
Yeah, I
protective.
do.
I could not have my mom, there panicking that her son would be, a homeless vagrant in New York. And so I kept it mum. And so at this point in time, we were like, it felt like we were inches away from raising money from this world-class investor and being able to kind of take our company to the next level. And he was like, the only thing stopping you is the fact that I hate this idea. And so now we're like, oh my gosh, like, what do? And so we're on the phone and we're talking to this guy. We end up talking to him for like 30, 45 minutes. And basically where we land is he's like, look, Lucius, you are a restaurant tech investor. You know that the very largest a QR code menu company can get is XYZ. And that XYZ that's as large as it gets is not really enough to build this like world-class generational company. And we're in the business of investing in world-class generational companies. And so what are you going to do? And so that's when I, start fumbling over my words, trying to do whatever I can to, salvage the moment. And at one point, I'm like, and you know what we'll do? Once we get all these restaurants paying for our software, and using our QR code menus in their restaurant, the way that we become a billion-dollar company is that we then stitch all of those little storefronts that we've built together, those menus, and turn it into a food delivery app. Because look at Uber Eats, look at DoorDash. They're food delivery apps, and they're worth $100 billion. And
Okay.
so once we do this, we'll do that.
Is
And
this something you came up with on the fly, or is this kind of like, what's that?
on the spot,
On the
literally on the spot.
Wow.
And so on the
Incredible.
spot, it's crazy. And so on the spot, I'm coming up with this. And I remember this so clearly. He was like, my thought and the thing that he was like, I've always thought this, but it's like, if you're going to swing, you might as well swing for the fences. And so in saying that, what he was telling us is he was like, if that's how you think you build $100 billion company, then you might as well start today and just start doing it. Don't wait until you go door to door and knock on 10,000 doors to then do the thing that is actually going to get you to the big leagues. Like just
Right.
start there. And so it was basically in that moment that we said, okay, no more QR code menus. We're going to do food delivery.
Food delivery. Oh my
And that's
goodness.
kind of the moment that everything switched. And we went from building this kind of knock on door, method to all of a sudden building this food delivery app that, just a year plus later became the number 2 food and beverage app in the App Store.
That's crazy. So I have to ask you, Lucius, now you had already by this time already had somewhat of a rapport with Y Combinator. And I know enough about Y Combinator to know that they are extremely selective as to who they're going to invite into that program. Is it safe to say that, and I'm not trying to take anything away from the merits of you actually getting in, but did it help to have a rapport with them up to that point where you were able to get in? Is this kind of one of those things where relationships, they talk about the importance of relationships and how you can always leverage those relationships down the line. Is this one of those instances where previous relationship or the previous report that you had with Y Combinator actually worked out for you?
Relationships are everything,
Right. Okay.
in every situation, and so, I think for us, and this again isn't a key example of it, but given the way that this partner who ultimately let us in and took a bet on us, felt about our idea, I think if we were anyone else, right, had I not had the experience of having worked at a YC company before and my co-founder being friends with a person that this guy had invested in before and really liked, if all of these things hadn't happened and we hadn't invested all that time to building these relationships, he easily could have looked at us and said, trash, just thrown our application in
Right.
trash.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
because we had, all of this kind of, experience and these people vouching for us and saying, hey, like I really like these guys and they're really sharp. And even if you don't love the idea of the thing that they're working on, they're going to work really hard and they're going to figure it out. Having people who could go to bat for us and, do that, I think was so essential. Like, I think without that, we easily would have just been another application in the trash can. And so I'm so fortunate that we had those things because what it did is it gave us the opportunity to prove ourselves. And, we still had to prove ourselves. We still had to go in there and be really good at pitching and really sharp and prove that we were able to actually sell this thing, even if the guy didn't like it. Even to get to where we are today, we had to prove ourselves. But we were given that chance because of the relationships. And so I think those two things go hand in hand.
Okay. We're going to talk about that viral moment, but I want to kind of make sure we differentiate where was BiteSight at that time before the viral video was published. Where were you by this time? Had you secured any funding, or what was the status of the company prior to the viral video?
Yeah, so this is a funny thing is that a lot of people don't realize that before that viral video, BiteSight had been around for over a year at that point. We'd been in beta, and so we really hadn't had a product that was fully out to the public yet, and we were still kind of testing it with some of our close friends and doing pilots on campuses across New York. But we had been working on the idea for quite a while because it took a long time to build out the infrastructure. You don't just wake up one day and be able to deliver 10,000 meals to people all across New York. That takes a lot of time to figure out and get right. And so what I would say is that prior to the viral video that we did for BiteSight, we had a product that was working. You could get food from A to B and you could do it consistently and quickly. And so people loved that. But we were also really figuring out what were the features that people really cared about and how do we build a product that people loved. And so, we'd been growing pretty modestly at the time, nothing crazy, to write home about, but we were growing, and so things were good. And so that was kind of pre-video. Then the video gets posted, and just gangbusters. We were literally growing. It would have to be 1,000% week over week. Just crazy, back to back to back, because that video got tens of millions of views.
Right.
And
Okay.
so, it was real crazy.
My brother's gonna show you the app that he built, and y'all are gonna like it.
Hi, so I built this app, and it's like TikTok meets DoorDash. You can scroll on videos of food, and anything you see, you can actually order and get it delivered like right to your door. And so I built this because, I wanted to see all my friends' favorite food delivery spots, and so now I can like go to their profile, see the places they liked and what they rated them. Yeah, everything you see, you can get delivered in like 15 minutes. It's like really cool. Thank you.
We're talking about the viral video. This is the one where your sister was involved, right?
Correct.
Okay. So let's talk about the viral video. And I'm guessing, as far as you're concerned, again, you create content on a regular basis. And you're just probably just doing what you typically do, right? Just doing the things that you need to do just to kind of make sure that BiteSight continues to stay relevant and all this other stuff. But now you make this particular video. Now I have to ask you, did you really think that this video was going to go viral, or was it just kind of like just you just making another video? I mean, now you got your sister in here now. Talk about that moment. Talk about, first of all, whose idea was it? How did this all come about? And talk about the impact that video had on the business.
Yeah. So, oh my goodness. So for starters, I had no idea it was going to go viral like this. I mean, that day, funnily enough, I probably filmed a dozen videos.
Right.
I filmed literally a dozen videos doing random things, dancing on the street, whatever it was, just because, you kind of got to throw some shots on goal and see what lands.
Right.
But what was funny is that this particular video, my version of it went so large and viral that I think a lot of people have incorrectly credited me as the person who came up with the format, but that was not the case. Someone else actually had come up with a format, a few days prior. And what's awesome is that I had a friend who also builds apps, much like we do. Also went through Y Combinator, so on and so forth. And he had texted me and he was like, "Hey, Lucius, I did this exact same concept with my girlfriend just the other day, where she was like, this is my boyfriend's app. You're going to like it and whatever." And he was like, "My video got 1 million views. Like, that's pretty crazy. Like, you should try this same concept. And I bet you would crush it with BiteSight." And so I was kind of like, oh, like, maybe I'll do it. Maybe I won't. Like, it's like fine, whatever. And so I was kind of really not sold on the concept, but I was like, whatever. And so I texted my sister, who was interning in New York that summer, or only a few months ago. She's interning in New York. And I was like, "Hey, I'm working at a coffee shop today. Can you stop by on your way home and help me film a TikTok?" And so literally, I think we did like 1 or 2 takes. Nothing serious, just 1 or 2 takes. I said, "Hey, here's the video. I need you to do this thing, and I need you to be extra sassy because apparently that's what's getting people talking."
Right.
And so she literally takes the video, and that was it. We didn't even post it. Like, I did not even post it after we took it. Actually, what happened is that the next morning, I got up, and I was just like, "Oh, yeah, I forgot. I filmed that video. Let me post it." And I posted it. I put my phone down because I got to start working, and I always get distracted if I'm on TikTok. And so I had to put my phone away. But next thing I know, I get a text from my sister that's like, "Lucius, it's been 20 minutes and you've got 20,000 views." And I'm like, "Oh, that's crazy. That's pretty sick." And so in my head, I'm like, okay, the video's doing pretty well. It's doing better than my average video and it's growing pretty quickly. Maybe you'll get 100,000. Maybe you'll get a few 100,000. Maybe if I'm lucky, it'll get 1 million.
Right.
Never in 1,000,000 years did I think you'd become one of the most viewed videos on the internet that day. Like, never in 1,000,000 years. But it did. And so
let me, what was this on TikTok, or is this a combination? Was this on IG, TikTok, or what platform were we talking about?
Well, so that was
just
the
in
funny
general
thing, that I posted it. So the metrics wise, all in general, right? This is across all types of platforms.
Gotcha. Okay.
But
gotcha.
Basically what happened is that I posted on TikTok and that was it. But when it started taking off, I was like, well, I guess I should repost it on Instagram, let everyone see it.
Right.
Post it on Instagram, immediately gets millions of views too. And what was awesome is that, I posted on TikTok and I posted on Instagram on my story, but then it started getting shared. And so now I had all kinds of people sending me the craziest screenshots. My friends were sending me screenshots of being like, this person from Love Island, this celebrity, this music artist, whatever, is like resharing and reposting or posting on their story. And so that's where a lot of the views came from. Not even just from, me posting it on my TikTok or posting on my Instagram, but from all of these, celebrities and influencers and everyone else out there who's supporting me also posting it themselves. And so that was really, really cool.
So this video blows up. Talk about how that impacted business for you.
Yeah. So for us, it was crazy. I mean, we had been growing really steadily, and then all of a sudden we were not growing steadily. We were growing like a rocket ship. And so, everything was kind of up and to the right, and it was crazy in that sense. But it was also cool because we got a lot of investor interest. I was talking to all kinds of people. I mean, people in music, people in entertainment, the largest names that you can think about. I was sitting in their offices, having meetings, talking about investing. And many of them actually did end up investing in our company, which was fantastic to happen. And even traditional investors and venture capitalists invested in our company too. And so for us, that was awesome. It was awesome. And it changed the trajectory of our business, not only because it helped us raise additional capital and kind of springboard us to that next level, which, we haven't announced our current fundraise, but we're really fortunate to have just kind of closed everything up within the last days. And there will be a public announcement coming very soon, and stay tuned for that. But we were really fortunate to get these people to, back and support us. And also, it's been great because so many people know about what we're doing. And so still to this day, we've got people who comment in DM or whatever and say like, hey, bring BiteSight to Houston, Dallas, Tulsa, Oklahoma, places I've never even heard about before.
Wow.
And I think, that's the type of, media and coverage and growth and, awareness that money can't buy, which I think is really crazy.
So you're saying you're going to announce you're close to announcing closing a seed round, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
We're closing our seed round right now, and so we'll hopefully announce. Few weeks.
Okay. So how much have you raised up to this point?
Yeah. So prior to this point, prior to the seed round, we raised $1.5 million.
$1.5 million. Wow.
$1.5 million, and so now in this current round, we've raised a good bit more than that. And so once all the kind of pieces come together and we have all the legalese kind of detailed out, it'll be exciting to announce. But what's awesome is that I think depending on how much of the kind of world of entrepreneurship and VC, venture capital and startups that you know about, 1.5 million may seem like a lot of money.
Right.
And it definitely is. It definitely is a lot of money. We're so grateful that we got those investments. But you've got to compare that to companies like Uber Eats and DoorDash that have raised billions, right? Like they raised billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars from investors, and so in that sense, the fact that we are able to even compete with these folks, and we've done it with, 0.001% of what they raised is incredible. And that's, I think, what keeps our team so excited and engaged is there's a real David and Goliath match going on where, there's these Goliaths out there who have built these companies who think no one is ever going to ever try to compete or challenge them to, build something that's better. And yet here we are doing exactly that.
So before we go, and I know we'll run out of time here, let's talk about the future real quick about BiteSight. You're going to be announcing a new seed round in the near future. But with that, where do you focus in the interim? I mean, are we focusing on growth? Are we focusing on partnerships? Are we focusing on evolution? What exactly does that look like in the interim going forward?
All of the above, truly all of the above. We've got a really exciting partnership that we're working on right now with a major food delivery company actually in the space. And so that is exciting. We're really gearing up for that to be announced soon too. Growth is something that we're always thinking about. And so constantly figuring out how do we get more people to download BiteSight? How do we get more people to try? the product and things like that. And then I think the last thing for us is figuring out how do we evolve the product where it keeps delivering value, and it keeps creating an experience that is so unique and so beneficial to people that they've got no choice but to use it. And so what I will say is that we've got some things that are on the product roadmap that our engineering team is literally just in the other room working on right now that I think are truly going to change how people order food delivery for the rest of our lifetime. And that is what's really exciting, I think. And so I just can't wait for all of that to come out.
Lucius, let me ask you, man, there is someone out there who's either around your age or probably a little older than you, who probably sees you and say, wow, this guy's really got it together. But for those who still may be, kind of debating on whether or not they need to invest in themselves, what bit of advice would you give to those individuals who may still be kind of like at the start of their entrepreneurial journey and may not necessarily, they're conflicted on, I've got a good thing going on right here, and I don't necessarily want to rock the boat, versus I got this thing that I really want to put out there that I think is really going to change the way this. How do you leverage that? What would be your advice to someone who may be kind of like at that fork in the road, trying to make a decision on whether to go left or right?
So, I have a lot of friends who stayed, who stayed in finance, who stayed in consulting, whatever it may be. And I've got a ton of respect for these people because they are incredibly smart and they're killing in their respective careers. But, one of the things that I think, I think uniquely understand about myself is that I'm very much the type of person who knows that if I don't try, there's a 0% chance that I succeed at something. And so even if I try and fail, I knew that I gave myself more than a 0% chance. Even if there's only a 0.001% chance that I would succeed and that there would be a great outcome, I knew that that was infinitely higher than a 0% chance that came from not starting. And so, my kind of advice is that, the best time to start anything was 5, 10, 20 years ago, but the second best time to start is today. And so take that risk and do that thing because whether or not you do it now or you do it later, that time is still going to pass. And so what I would say to that too is that the moment where this really hit was, I spent almost 2 years at General Atlantic as an investor. And I had this whole kind of class of analysts who started around the same time as me. And I remember that I left and I went to go build BiteSight. And I remember catching up with all of my friends who had stayed and they hadn't left and they had stayed in the same place, stayed at the same job, at the same company that we were all at. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh my goodness, almost a year has passed. And I feel like I've lived so many lives and experienced so many things. And at the same time, had I not taken that leap of faith and believed in myself, I would have been sitting in the same desk doing the exact same thing that I was a year ago. And that was, I think, the moment where my kind of brain chemistry shifted. And I was like, that's the whole point. Like, that is the whole point, is that had I not taken that motion and that movement forward, whether or not I succeed is irrelevant, but I'd be in the same spot. And I'd rather give myself that opportunity to have moved forward and have done something new and have tried something and pushed myself and taken that bet on myself than been too scared and just stayed in that same spot. And so I would think about those things and see, how that applies to your life and realize that there's no better time than the present.
Let me ask you, if we are having this conversation, say 5 years from now, this exact same conversation, what would success look like for you? Not necessarily with BiteSight, but for Lucius McDaniel IV. What will success look like five years from now if we're having this conversation?
The reason that we started this company and the reason that I, kind of went to entrepreneurship to begin with is because of two things. One, I wanted to solve problems. And two, I had this really, really deep love and passion for small businesses and restaurants. And like my goal and the reason that we do all of this to begin with is because we know that there are so many local small businesses and restaurants that are the fabric of our society. There's all these small business owners that are pouring their heart into every single dish that they're making. And so, for me, success looks like we are driving more and more traffic from consumers and people ordering food delivery to those businesses that deserve to be, tried and supported in the community rather than people ordering from the same big chains over and over again. Because those are the companies and those small businesses are the people who, make up our society. Those are our neighbors. Those are our friends. Those are our family members. And we want to make it really easy to support them. And so, regardless of what BiteSight looks like and how the product has evolved, in the next 5 years, I think as long as we are still, executing on that mission of helping these small businesses find their new customer and get new users and keeping their doors open, that'll be success, for me and for the company.
Before we go, brother, let people know how they can find you.
Yes, please check me out on Twitter. I'm Lucius IV. I'm Lucius IV on Instagram as well. Our TikTok account, which is, the account where I think the video was very first posted, is realeater.flu, FLOU. And so check me out on any of those platforms. And if you're interested in getting your restaurant on BiteSight or working at our company, we're hiring a lot right now, given the new fundraising, please do not hesitate to reach out and get in touch.
He is Lucius McDaniel IV, the founder and CEO of BiteSight. And he's doing tremendous things. Brother, thank you so much for taking a moment to speak with me and to our audience. And dare I say, man, good luck to you going forward, because I think this is just kind of like the early stages of someone where we're going to see an awful lot and hear an awful lot about going forward. So thank you so much for taking a few minutes to talk to me.
Thank you for having me.
All right, brother.